Bob, would you like to return to chair and open it up for group conversation?
Fine. Keep going.
Okay, the floor is open, and all you need to do is, if you have a question for someone specifically, you got Noreen, and you got Mary, Brian, and Brady. So, who wants to speak? Adrian.
Thank you, Noreen. Thank you to the panel. This is so much fun. I'd like to ask Noreen a clarifying question. A question from 50 years in the future. As I understand the paper, I think you laid out a pretty bulletproof argument. You know, in broad strokes, the approach that we see, the hope for the future expressed by Kurzweil and the like, seems pretty fatally flawed, especially not taking into account the importance of the body and emotions to account for what a person-like thing would be. I mean, that seems like we've established that this is a hopeless cause. But I'm not sure if you believe that it is in principle impossible if in 50 years the AI researchers of that time have taken on board these criticisms. For example, they have said, well, we need some sort of analog to a human body. Maybe it's a cybernetic body with a cybernetic endocrine system that interacts with its environment in a way which is somewhat as rich as the way that human bodies do. And I think the reason that this is an interesting question is because even in the here and now, when we talk about the presence of a body in a human person as we see them in front of us now, we have to account for difficult cases like the profoundly disabled, people who are paralyzed, people whose body has a minimal influence on their life as a full human person. So the big question is, well, I think we can all, I certainly agree, this idea, the dualism that has been, that you've argued against is probably going to be long dead by 50 years from now, and that we are more than information, but I'm not sure that whether you believe that in 50 years cyber technologies in broad strokes will not be able to produce something that's a bit like a person.
Well, you gave me a lovely weasel word there at the end by saying a bit like a person.
Yeah.
You know, I think there is a chance that they may be able to produce something that is a bit like a person, but that isn't going to be a full person. The question that I find myself asking, though, is this what we really want? You know, and it seems to me the only reason that this might be what we really want is for this sort of quasi-immortality. You know, that beyond that, it seems to me to make much more sense to be partners with computers, to let computers do the things that computers do really well, and let human beings go on doing the things that human beings do really well, and not to put our computer eggs in the human-like basket, but into the basket of what are the things that humans don't do that we would like to get done. My other comment to what you said is that I might be wrong, and I don't think I'll be here 50 years from now to find out, but I think coming up with something that is more than a bit like a person is such a complex task. I mean, you yourself just said you've added, besides the complexity of getting the brain right now, we've got to model the whole endocrine system and everything else, that I certainly would not see this happening in 50 years.
My question has to do with the body and the soul. You know, your topic has to do with dualism, and we heard about metaphysics, which goes back to Thomas Aquinas and he felt that the form of the body was the soul, and many of the medieval philosophers and theologians, they all wrote a anima text. And then Descartes came along and he said, well, we're going to reject scholasticism, so there's no more soul, we just have the mind and the body. My question is, what is the metaphysics? Because I remember Nancy Murphy's book, Whatever Happened to the Soul, and she seems to reject the soul. Well, what is replacing it? What is the metaphysics that we're using today? If we do have a metaphysics, so we're just saying, well, there's something more than just the body. But what is that more than the body?
I think that certainly among transhumanists, they would say there isn't anything.
Right, I realize that, yeah.
You know, it's a pure, I mean, one of the things, and I'm somewhat pessimistic, I believe it was, perhaps it was Mary who said, you know, we need a new way to talk to these people, a new way to kind of get our message out. And one of the problems, I think, is that there's sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken, reductionistic materialism as a beginning assumption.
I almost got that from Nancy Murphy's book. She said it's a physicalist explanation. Maybe someone can correct that. That's what I got. I don't know if anybody remembers that book. But it seemed like she was holding out for a purely physical interpretation of the human person. Maybe not. It's what I got from it. She graduated from here, I know that. She's
Bob was her.
Yeah.
Mentor.
Well, you're familiar with that book? Whatever
Bob,
happened
would
to
you
the
like to, you studied under Nancy Murphy, and what did she say?
Under Noreen.
Under
Had a
Noreen
great
as well.
education being here, I'll tell you. No, I think you're misunderstanding her. The issues between monism and dualism.
What?
Monism and dualism. That's a fundamental issue. So if you're not a dualist, you're a monist. Now, within monism, you can be a reductive, eliminative monist, and that's materialist. Or you can be a non-reductive physicalist, which is Nancy. So Nancy takes very seriously the higher epistemologies of the mind, but she's a monist. Now, she used the word physicalism. I think it's a mistake.
That's in her book, Physicalist. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a mistake because it sounds like she's saying that there's only material. She wants to be more nuanced than that.
Mhm.
But nevertheless, the ontology is monist, not dualist. Okay, so she's not an eliminative reductionist materialist. That's what she's rejecting. She's a non-reductionist physicalist. Okay. So it's one of 3 or 4 kinds of monism which are not eliminative.
When you use the word physicalist, physical, I don't see where you have anything spiritual there. The word itself means physical.
That's why I don't use it.
Well, that's the word she used.
I know it is.
Yeah, Nancy.
But it doesn't mean she rejects the spiritual.
I understand, yeah.
Yeah, her epistemology is holist. Her ontology is monist. She uses the word physicalist. I think it's confusing.
Yeah, Nancy would not have any fraternity with the transhumanists. The transhumanists do not think metaphysically, but they have a kind of surreptitious metaphysics. They believe that the destiny has been set by biological evolution, and that evolution is progressive, and that where evolution is going is towards higher and higher intelligence, and that evolution has bequeathed the present generation of these white guys to grab a hold of the reins of evolution and increase the speed of intelligence creation much more rapidly. So that is not a metaphysic, but it is their spirituality, so to speak. And it's semi-official that they are materialist atheists. They buy into the myth of religious violence, that all violence is created by religion, and they're going to transcend religion through intelligence, and that will eventually eliminate violence. So they have a doctrine of salvation that's built right in there. At any rate, I'm talking too much, but it is a whole worldview. It's not just tinkering with the electronics that we're talking about. Yeah.
And one of the problems with that worldview, I think, is that it does represent I'd say a rather extreme rupture with evolution, even though they posit it as a continuation of evolution, and that it's well within evolutionary thinking. However, evolution, in the Darwinian sense, works by natural selection. And their view of this is then to throw away natural selection. Problem is, the mechanism of natural selection produces things that are eminently suitable to their environment. But their mechanism is actually not considering the environment at all. And I think that makes it somewhat dangerous.
Fire away, Peter.
Okay, I'll read this for you, Noreen. You may not agree with me, Noreen, but I believe there's no exhilaration quite like sipping Talisker Scotch from the Isle of Skye while lost in a blizzard whiteout in a 75-mile-an-hour wind on the 14,000-foot icy summit of Mount Shasta. My summer solstice experience in 2009 was totally embodied, as is Stephen Hawking's quest from his wheelchair for a theory of everything. Would I be Peter Hess if I were not a mountaineer? Would Hawking be the physicist he is had he not contracted ALS? Since embodiment is so important to humans, from the smell of freshly turned soil to the experience of holding a newborn to the kinesthesis of exquisite piano playing as Bob showed us last night, why are so many people closet dualists? Dualists seem to be alive and well in America. Americans cannot imagine a disembodied Super Bowl experience, and yet they eat up the popular idea of past life regression. In 2010, a speaker came to the GTU and talked about out-of-the-body experiences in a way that provoked at least me and Naomi Seidman to challenge her on her unacknowledged dualist assumptions. So my question is, why in this country is there such a cognitive dissonance between, on the one hand, recognizing that embodiment is utterly essential to being human, and on the other hand, an assumption that the particularity of those bodies involved is utterly irrelevant?
Beats me. I think you put your finger on a really good point, and I actually don't know. Yeah, I really don't know.
I mean, I can understand, Adrian pointed out, I imagine somebody like Hawking would be quite happy in a resurrection life not to be in a wheelchair. But since embodiment is so important to me, maleness is important. My relation to everybody I know, I don't want to be in the life of the world to come, not knowing anybody I know here, not doing anything that I have done here. I want to be connected. And yet, the whole idea of past life regression, which seems to be popular with at least 50% of the population, seems to make all that irrelevant.
Past life regression is a part of a belief not in resurrection but in reincarnation. And reincarnation does get around some of the problems that we find in the Christian view of resurrection. If we do have a separable soul that is somehow able to carry its moral development from life to life to life, it answers a lot of questions. I mean, you can answer questions like, why are some people so immoral and other people are a lot more moral? And in Eastern traditions, they have an answer to this, which is, well, maybe that immoral person is among the ones born. It's their first shot at being a human. Give them a break. Give them a bye. We have questions that can be answered like, well, why is there people who are transgender? And they could say, well, they were they were female in their last life, and they just haven't gotten over it yet. They got male this life, and they're uncomfortable. So reincarnation, and then with reincarnation, you can say it provides a way of explaining different difficulties, like Hawking's wheelchair, in saying, well, maybe there's something that the soul that is Stephen Hawking has not yet learned, that being in a wheelchair is going to teach him. And so in this life, he had to be in a wheelchair, you know, in his next life, he probably won't be, assuming he learned his lesson, and if he hasn't learned his lesson, he'll be in a wheelchair again until he does learn his lesson. So these are ways in which this idea, in which reincarnation is, it's a nice way of answering some of the difficulties that we have, that we face when we say you only go around once. Well, then how come it seems so unfair that we go around in different ways? You know, I guess I can't tell you that reincarnation is false. It has simply not been part of the Christian worldview.
Well, I think we should wind down and give thanks to our principal speaker, Noreen.